The old house had always carried whispers. Not from the neighbors, not from the passing winds, but from the house itself. Its walls had soaked in decades of stories, some told, many left unspoken. When Daniel moved in, he wasn't looking for history. He was looking for silence. After a series of restless years, failed jobs, and a broken engagement, the quiet streets of this forgotten town felt like a refuge. The house was cheap, much cheaper than it should have been. The agent explained it away with talk about the market, but Daniel noticed the way her eyes avoided his when they passed the second floor. He didn't press her. He didn't want answers. He just wanted a fresh start. The house had 5 rooms upstairs. 4 were open, empty, waiting for furniture he didn't yet own. 1 remained locked. The door was painted the same faded white as the others, but something about it was different. The brass knob was darker, colder to the touch. The keyhole seemed older, like it belonged to a different time. Daniel asked the agent about it once, casually, but she just muttered something about storage and changed the subject. He let it go, at least at first. On his first night, Daniel slept on an air mattress in the living room. He woke to a sound he couldn't place. A faint rhythm, like something scraping, stopping, then starting again. He sat up in the darkness, heart pounding, but the sound stopped. He told himself it was the old house settling. Houses groaned, wood shifted. That was all. But when he finally dragged his bed upstairs a week later, the noise returned. It always came from above, from the locked room. At 3 in the morning, the sound would begin. A dragging, a tapping, sometimes slow, sometimes urgent. He pressed his ear against the door once, desperate to prove it was just pipes or air, but the noise stopped the instant his head touched the wood. The silence pressed against him harder than the sound had. Daniel tried to ignore it. He told himself the room was just storage, maybe sealed off for good reason. Maybe it was filled with mold or unsafe flooring. He avoided the hallway at night, forcing himself to focus on unpacking, on work, on rebuilding his life. But the house didn't let him. One evening, after a long shift, he found the door slightly open. Just a sliver, enough to see that the darkness inside was thicker than any shadow he'd ever known. He froze. He knew he had never unlocked it. He didn't even have a key. The hallway air felt colder, and the hairs on his arms rose. Slowly, he pushed the door shut and stepped back, his heart thundering. He told himself maybe the lock was broken, maybe the wind had pushed it. But that night, when he tried to sleep, the dragging started again, louder than ever, as if whatever was inside was punishing him for closing it. The next morning, Daniel searched the entire house for a key. Drawers, cabinets, even the basement. Nothing. He considered calling a locksmith, but the thought of someone else entering that room felt wrong, dangerous. He told himself he'd learn to live with it. People lived next to train tracks. People lived above bars. He could live with a little noise. But the house wasn't done with him. One night, Daniel woke to find the door wide open. Not cracked this time. Wide. The hallway light spilled inside, but it didn't reveal anything. The darkness seemed to swallow the light whole. He stood at the threshold, every muscle screaming for him to close it again, to run, to leave. But something in that darkness tugged at him. A pull, subtle but undeniable, as though the room had been waiting for him all along. He stepped inside. The air was heavy, damp, colder than the rest of the house. The smell hit him first, something sour, like wet soil mixed with iron. His eyes adjusted slowly, but the room remained stubbornly dim. The walls were bare, the floor dusty. And yet, he wasn't alone. He felt it. The way you feel eyes on you in a crowded room. The way your skin prickles when someone stands too close. Then he saw it. In the far corner, against the wall, something shifted. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Something moved. A shape hunched low, indistinct but human. His breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" His voice cracked in the silence. The figure didn't answer. It only tilted its head, slow, deliberate, as though curious about him. Then, in the stillness, a sound filled the room. Not dragging this time. Breathing. Deep, labored, coming from that corner. Daniel stumbled back, slamming into the doorframe. His shaking hand reached for the knob, pulling the door shut with all the force he could muster. The lock clicked on its own, sealing the room as if it had never opened. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen with every light on, his body trembling, replaying what he had seen or thought he had seen. By morning, he convinced himself it was exhaustion, a hallucination, a trick of shadows. But deep down, he knew better. Days passed. He avoided the second floor as much as possible. He kept to the kitchen, the living room, the backyard. But the house adapted. The sound spread. Now he heard them in the vents, in the floorboards, in the walls. Whispers slipped into his sleep. Whispers he couldn't understand, but that filled him with dread. He felt watched, always watched, by something patient, waiting. One evening, he found something new. A voicemail on his phone. He hadn't heard it ring, hadn't seen the call come through. The message was short, barely audible, but the voice was his own. Whispering, repeating 3 words. "Open the door." Daniel dropped the phone. His stomach turned to ice. He didn't remember recording it, didn't remember speaking those words. But the voice was his. That night, the noises stopped. For the first time since moving in, the house was silent. Too silent. Daniel tried to take comfort in it, but the silence pressed against him, suffocating. Sleep came in restless fragments. At some point, in the middle of the night, he woke to find himself standing in the hallway, in front of the locked door. His hand was already on the knob. He yanked it back, stumbling away, gasping. He didn't remember leaving his bed. He didn't remember walking upstairs. But the door seemed to pulse, as if it had drawn him there, as if it needed him. The next morning, Daniel packed a bag. He told himself he'd stay at a motel, just for a few days, just until he figured out what to do. But when he tried to leave, the front door wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the wood refused to budge. He tried the back door, the windows, everything was sealed. The house wasn't letting him go. For hours, he sat in the living room, bag in his lap, listening to the silence. Then, from upstairs, the breathing started again. Slow, steady, louder than ever. The sound of something waiting. He knew, then, what the house wanted. He made it through the day by pacing, muttering to himself, trying to keep his mind from unraveling. But as the sun dipped, his body grew heavy, his thoughts clouded. He didn't remember falling asleep, but when he opened his eyes, he was standing in the hallway again. The door to the room was open, wide. The darkness inside was no longer still. It writhed like a living thing. Daniel's heart pounded. His body moved without his command, step by step into the room. The air thickened, pressing against his lungs. In the corner, the figure waited. Closer this time. Its form clearer. Skin stretched thin, eyes hollow, its mouth twisted into something that wasn't a smile, but wanted to be. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The door slammed behind him. The last thing Daniel heard was the sound of the lock clicking shut. And then, silence. Weeks later, the house went back on the market. Cheaper than it should have been. The agent walked a young couple through the rooms, smiling, charming, careful never to mention the locked door upstairs. When the wife asked about it, the agent's smile faltered for just a second before she said the same line she always did. Just storage. Nothing to worry about. But if you stood very still in the upstairs hallway, if you pressed your ear against the door, you could swear you heard it. Breathing. Waiting.